discovered I get inspiration for sermons in some places that I just don't expect it. So this one I want to thank Anita because she actually gave me the inspiration for this one and she probably had no idea. But we were in her garden the other day and she's got it set up with this little seated area and everything, and it's actually really nice. It's quite comfortable out there. It was shady, it was a hot day, but we were sitting there and she suddenly said this is where she goes to talk to God. And I've often heard people talk about talking to God. Many refer to a place that they have set aside for talking to God. I think this is great when I hear people talking about how they talk to God. I'm certain that they are putting their faith in God and putting their problems in His hands. Just as she described with sunflower seeds, putting your faith in God that things will work out. But I frequently wonder one thing: who's really listening when God answers? Talking to God is comforting, and asking Him for help is great. But if you're not listening when He answers, what good does it do? So I've decided to give a few tips on talking to God that I did a little research on. Just some ideas that I researched around, searched on the internet, read in the Bible. Came up with a few little pointers on talking to God and, most importantly, listening to God. So here we go. When talking to God, you should pick a place without distraction. Praying can be done anywhere. But if you're talking to Him, how will you hear Him over the sound of traffic or the kids screaming? I can barely hear myself think when the kids get going. Nonetheless, listen to what God is trying to tell me. And even if He does tell me something, am I fully focused to pay attention with the kids screaming or traffic or anything? So, there are many verses referring to God's voice being thunderous, but there are also verses about God's voice being a whisper, as in 1 Kings 19, 11 through 13. The Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. So if God can speak to you in a whisper, you better be quiet, because you might not hear Him. Not to mention, if you're upset about something and you're placing your problem in God's hand and you're talking to God, do you really want Him to shout at you? I prefer a whisper. If I'm upset, somebody yelling at me is really not going to get the message through. So, make sure you're in a place where you can solely focus on God. A place like a garden, as Anita uses, or any place that's personal to you. That you can be alone and just talk to God and listen for His answers. My next tip is don't expect a voice. God will not always speak to you in a voice. Most of us would probably freak out if we heard a voice. Many times, you may just have a vision in your head, or a dream, or even just an idea on how to handle your problem. Acts 2:17 says, "In the last days, God says, I will pour out my Spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your young men will see visions. Your old men will dream dreams." You may not even realize that it was God's way of telling you what you need to do. Psalm 65, 4 through 5 says, "Blessed are those who choose and bring near to live in your courts. We are filled with the good things of your house, of your holy temple. You answer us with awesome and righteous deeds. God our Savior, the hope of all the ends of the earth and of the farthest seas." You answer us with awesome and righteous deeds. Think about that. He may not answer you at all. Or so you may think. You may think God is ignoring you. God never ignores us. But you just may not notice He's answering you. He may simply solve your problem, or change your situation, or show you that what you thought was a problem wasn't even a problem at all. How many times have we done that? We're stressing over something terribly. Something's going on in our lives and we're horribly stressed. And we're praying on it. We're waiting for an answer. And then when you get to that situation, it's really mild. It was nothing at all that we were stressing over. God tells us He will never put an obstacle in front of us we can't handle. But we still stress over these things. But that's natural to us. Sometimes we stress over the simplest of things. We think it's going to be so difficult. It's going to be impossible for me to do. But you just have to listen with both your ears and your heart. Be open to just having a random thought that may pop in your head. Just remember, don't take credit for that random thought. It probably wasn't you who thought of it. God will answer us in mysterious ways. But remember, it was Him who answered. put it in perspective, a little joke I read online. A successful businessman is about to conclude the deal of his life. That is, if he can find somewhere to park his car and get to his meeting in time. He tours the streets. It's rush hour. There's nowhere to park. And he starts sweating. At a last resort, he starts praying, "Dear God, please help me find a place to park my car. I'll do anything. I'll visit my mother in the hospital. I'll go to church every Sunday. I'll put more on the plate. But please, please." Right then, in front of his office building, a limo goes away and frees the biggest parking space ever. The man replies, "Never mind, God, I got one." Remember, give credit where credit is due. My next tip, don't expect to get the answer you want. I can't remember where I heard it, but someone once said, if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans. Because guess what? Your plans don't matter to God. What matters is His plans for you. If you keep pursuing your plans, but you're not listening to God's plans for you, where are you going to get? You're going to get somewhere you probably don't need to be. And you may find out your destination was not where you wanted to be. You can have all the plans in the world, but they really don't matter. God has a plan for all of us. Unfortunately, it's pretty easy to stray from God's plan if you're not listening. And we all want to be where God wants us, don't we? A while back, I did a sermon on challenges, and we all addressed challenges we were facing, and I mentioned listening for what we have to face. And we wrote these challenges in a box down here, and they're still down here. And if anybody's gotten an answer to that challenge, I say come up here and take that envelope and tear it up, because God has answered that challenge. It may not have been in the way you want. None of us get the answer we're always looking for. We sometimes face an answer we completely did not want. But, like I said, who wants to go somewhere that God doesn't want you to go? It's like driving the wrong way down a one-way street. Sure, it may get you where you want to go a little quicker, but you also might get into a head-on collision with another car. Sometimes God may want you to take the long way to your destination. Someone else along the way might need a ride. Or there might be trouble down the path that you were already heading. How many times have you gone the wrong way in traffic just to find out, hey, there was actually an accident down that road, and I'm glad I didn't make that turn. I missed my turn. So only God knows, but maybe the path He's sending you down is even harder than the easy path. But He has a lesson in mind for you. He may send you down a harder path than you really need to go down. But the path He sends you down will make you stronger, or prepare you for something you'll face even farther down the line. So when you're listening to God, remember, listen with an open mind and an open heart. You may not necessarily like the answer, but there is a reason for it. Give an example. Pastor Fran's been asking me about taking over as pastor of the church, and I'd like to someday. And I prayed on it, because that's not something you jump into lightly, especially for me. I have a bit of a history behind me with the church and decisions, and it was something that I really prayed on, and I want to do it, but just because I want to do something doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. So I prayed on it. And we discussed it in the last business meeting, what we were going to do someday. And I prayed and asked God, and I said, what is it you want me to do, God? Well, I was pretty confident that He does want me up here. But then, not even a week later, another deployment came up. And I desperately don't want to go. But God has a plan for me. He must want me to learn something more, or experience something more, that will help me in my ministry in the long run. I don't know. It's God's plan. I just have to follow it. See where it leads me. When I come back, well, then church won't go anywhere. And maybe I'll have something more to offer. At least I hope so. Finally, my last tip. Look to God when you're talking to Him. Open your heart to Him. Let your heart be filled with His love and His grace. For one, you are more open then to an answer if you know that regardless of what the answer is, it's given with love. Sometimes as parents, we don't give our kids the answer they want, but we give them the answer they need because we love them. Who here gives in to their kids every time they ask for something? You gave in to Megan every time? But we don't give in to them every time because we know what's right for them. God knows what's right for us. But you have to be listening with all your heart and focused on God at the time when you're talking to Him, and most importantly when you're listening to Him. You can't be driving down the road distracted, paying attention to traffic, talking to God and expecting to hear an answer from Him. Because if you get a vision right then, you might get into an accident. So hopefully you go somewhere where you can focus solely on God. Not just someplace quiet, but someplace where you're not looking at distractions around you. You're focused. You're looking in the direction you need to look. Your eyes are straight ahead on a focused path where God can speak to you. After all, Deuteronomy 4:29 says, "But if from there you seek the Lord your God, you will find Him if you seek Him with all your heart and with all your soul." So in closing, remember, it is truly great to talk to God. It's a beautiful thing to lay your problems at God's feet in complete faith that He will help you through your problems. He won't solve your problems for you. He may just give you the answer, point you in the right direction, or that's part of the thing. You may have to figure it out on your own, and that's what makes you stronger. But remember, like I said before, He will not put anything in your path that you cannot handle. And as long as you're talking to God and you're listening to God, that is one of the greatest things about our God, is that we have a direct line to our God. We can talk to our God and He will answer us. There's no limitations. He can't just hold, it's not that He's limited to one conversation at a time. He's focused on all of us constantly. And He will answer us as long as we listen, we put our faith in Him. If we put our faith in God, that sunflower will grow. She gave me a good one there. I have to thank you for that. Thank you. I went tied in beautifully. But just remember, when you're talking to God, listen. Listen for the answer. Be open to whatever the answer is, whether you like it or not. The answer's there. You just have to be willing to follow what God tells you. Thank you.